Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. Today is a topic that I just know has been really present on a lot of people's minds, and it's a conversation I've had a lot. I posted, it was like my first kind of big business related thread that I posted online. It was about ethical pricing strategies. I ended up starting like a LinkedIn newsletter based on that post. Like, I'm so passionate about this. I know the people that I have here today care a lot about this. So before we get into the actual discussion, let's just give you a lay of the land of who you're hearing from. If you're new here, I'm so glad you're here. My name is Sarah. I am the host of the Big Brave Business podcast, and I also run a podcast production and strategic consulting company called Podfox Media.
Hi, I'm Becky Mollenkamp. I'm a feminist business coach, and I run the Feminist Podcasters Collective.
And I'm Jaren Dominique. I'm the CEO of Deviant Digital Services. I help businesses and brands be found online through services like SEO, digital ads, emails, etc.
And I'm Bea Victoria Albina. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a somatic and mindset life coach, and I'm the host of the Feminist Wellness Podcast.
A whole lot of feminism today. Okay, so today's big question is, how can pricing strategies reflect business values while remaining profitable and sustainable?
I was excited when I saw this one because that was a big question that my husband and I asked ourselves when we first started our agency 5 years ago. I don't know about you ladies, but in my industry, there are a lot of spammers and scammers in the digital realm. A lot of people that promise to get you on page one of Google as long as you pay them $2,500 right away, or you have to make a $50,000 commitment, but you're locked in with them for a year and they hold everything hostage. So right away, I was like, I want to make sure that we build something that helps people and that is transparent. But it took a little bit because we also have a team. So we also have to make sure that ROI was there. And I don't want to hog the spotlight or anything like that, but I do want to break down like how we approached that. We made the only 30-day commitments, put our pricing as low as possible, and everything billed in the rears so that you always had the work performance afterwards too. And everything is also available a la carte as well, so that no one's forced into services they don't like. So I'm sure we're going to spiral off from it, but that's one of the ways we tackled it. What do you ladies think?
So I come from medicine. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I was an herbalist. I worked in birth and death for many years. And those are areas of the world where there's this really kind of often yucky feeling story that healing work should be free. And let's layer onto that a feminist lens that reminds us that healing work has been, and I'm going to use the broad umbrella term women. If Shania Twain says, let's go, girl, and you go, you're women. Actually, I'm going to repeat that. Sorry. Today's one of the shittiest days in a long time. Can I restart? Yeah? Okay, great. Actually, Becky, why don't you go? I'm going to try to.
Okay, I love that. And I'm sorry you're having a shitty day. I hope it gets
Thank you.
better.
It's been a shitty couple of years, but whatever. Yeah.
I feel it. I think so much of what you said, Jaren, is really important, and I totally agree. I think for me, one of the things I like to consider is knowing who I'm selling to. Because I think it's really important to know who we're selling to understand pricing that actually meets their needs. That doesn't mean that everything has to be priced really low, right? It's knowing who is my audience. And if I know who that is, then I can come up with pricing structures that really work for them. And I can be explicit about that so that I'm not trying to put people into something they can't afford, that isn't for them, that I'm trying to be manipulative about it. I'm a big fan of being really clear about your pricing up front. I put it on my website. I want people to know because I don't want that to be a barrier. And for some people it would be. So I want to be very clear for people, like, this is for you if, right? But also I'm a big fan of using sliding scales and using equitable pricing models, meaning that there is whenever possible. And what that looks like for me is when it's not just my direct time. So when it's not a one-on-one situation, but I'm doing a group container or a class or course or product, I try very hard to use equitable pricing, meaning that there's multiple price points and that people can find the one that matches their privilege and or their oppression. So giving them some guidelines on this is for you if, right? And helping people sort of see for themselves where to put themselves. So that gives people more agency on choosing their pricing as well.
Bea here. So I come from healthcare. I am a family nurse practitioner. I was a doula. I worked in birth and death for many years. And in those worlds, there's this presumption that because it's quote unquote women's work, and we'll all just roll our eyes at that, it should be free. And who are you to make money? Right? This is healing work. And so somehow my time, my majillions of years of education and continuing ed should just be free. And that's something I've bumped against a lot. And so my pricing is an attempt to really thread that needle between access and sustainability, really keeping in mind, I pay my team not a living wage, but an outstanding wage. Right. And when things are going on in their lives, they get like little $100 in their Venmo, a little, do you know what I mean? Like that little surprise bump that's only possible when my pricing reflects the team I need to support, as well as supporting my own well-being. So my training is as a family nurse practitioner, but I'm a somatic life coach. If I'm not regulated, right? If I'm struggling, if I'm stressing, what am I bringing to the room? I also need to fund and invest in continued education and fund scholarships. And so there's this real tension between like martyrdom pricing, gatekeeping, and providing healing work that's really built to last, that it's sustainable for the client and for myself. Because if I priced everything at a loss or gave everything away for free, I'd be reinforcing that same codependent pattern that caregivers should self-sacrifice to like be good and worthy, and that helpers must go without, and that worth equals depletion. And that's not liberation, that's codependency culture, right, y'all?
Yeah. I love, there's so much interesting things to unpack in each of your journeys and pricing and how you structure. And I want to kind of add mine to that too. But first, I want to bounce off of what you said, Bea, about this kind of assumption that healing work we expect to be free. And I talked about this a little bit back in season 2 in one of the episodes where I said, I think sometimes, and I love that you called it martyrdom pricing. I think sometimes when we are servant heart oriented and we're very service based and we very much want to like make the world a better place with the work that we do, and that matters to us. I think that sometimes we do struggle with like, how much can I give away for free? And there's also even a level of, I think this is information everyone deserves to have access to. Like everyone should have the opportunity to heal. And we want that to be true, right? And so I think what I kind of my perspective on things in a previous episode that I shared, if you haven't heard that one, is that, and if you have, here's a little reminder of my perspective, which is the part that is a human right, that's okay to put out into the world for free. The part that is a service, that's the part that I have to get paid for because I also live in a capitalist society, right? Like, and it is so accurate that like, yeah, healers could provide free healing services if they also had all of their needs met by society. If society was then going to take care of our healers and was going to ensure that you had a comfortable, like, state of living and that you weren't responsible for those kind of things, then yeah, certainly. But if you still have to pay rent and pay for health insurance and you have to pay taxes and you have, then like, no, you also have to get paid. That's also just going to be part of it. So I think, and let alone continuing education and certifications and things like that, which also cost money. And if we wanted healing work to be free, they could be free. So then, I mean, if you want healing work to be free, you have to make it free. But anyway, so I think there's something to be said for all of that. But for me personally, one of the things that's been interesting that I've come up against, and I'm curious if this resonates with you all, is working with other business owners has really led to me realizing that some of my favorite accounts to work on are the people who are kind of like newer and don't know what they're doing, but they also need the most help and have the least budget. So that it's really hard because I think there's a lot of kind of coaches out there who will just tell you, and I know I said the C word, who will just tell you raise your prices. But that is such a difficult decision to make ethically, because raising your prices locks out an entire demographic of people who need access to your services. But how can you then restructure your services in a way that like creates boundaries in your own life and doesn't have you working 24/7 to someone's beck and call for $2? How do you do that in a way that like kind of balances all of those things? So I think, yeah, that's been the interesting kind of pricing situation that's come up for me, where I'm like, my offer and my pricing and my ideal client all have to be aligned. So if there's a different ideal client, the offer has to look different. And then therefore the pricing can look different. But it has to match up. Their budget has to match up with the price, has to match up with what we're actually offering. And that's been an interesting thing to try to balance for me.
Well, it changes too, like as your business grows. But yeah, echoing what Sarah said, Bea, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think all of us women business owners have had that moment, right? Where someone they express that they're interested, they start cheering on your accolades, they say they really want your service, and then as soon as they say the price, that's when they start tearing you down and they start using it as a negative against you. And thankfully, like as a business owner, I've been able to start spotting that. And I do think having ethical pricing already set up helps obviously me stand in my own and be like, no, this is the pricing and this is what me and my team are worth. And I know that we're going to get the job done. And this is very, very competitive. No one else is going to give this to you. So being able to just stand and be proud of that too. Something else though that you said, Sarah, is like how you were talking about, how can we give back to them, right? And that's actually something that I'm asking myself constantly, because I just got asked yesterday, like, oh, who do you work with? Are you only working with Fortune 500 companies? Do they have to have 5 million a year? What is it? And I said, no, yes, I have those, and those are my big brands, and of course I want those, but I also want to work with startups, and I don't want to segment myself away from the business owner that's just getting started. So actually, I'm currently in the middle of working on a lot of free content and a free video series where I can try to educate business owners and brand owners so that they know where to get started. So it is a balancing act for sure. And it's always fun when someone tries to call you out on it. So you got to feel solid in your pricing to stand up to those naysayers.
For sure. And I feel that having a lot of free items and free offerings is really what helps me feel ethical and balanced. So my podcast, blog, social, masterclass, I do a free workshop series at least once a year called Why You Feel Stuck. And that's hours and hours of my very best content, no payment required. And so then I price Anchored, which is my 6-month program, and my shorter programs based on what it costs to ethically deliver world-class care. I offer payment plans at no extra cost. I've always found that wicked sketchy. Interest fees punish people with less access, right? If you don't have the credit, if you don't have the cash, but you're doing your best, why should you have to pay more? Because someone else can put it all down lump sum. I provide true scholarships. They're not like performative 10% discounts, no invasive financial audits, no humiliation, no dog and pony show. I don't make people like tap dance about their poverty. No. If you're asking me for a discount and telling me I need a scholarship, adelante. Like I'm not here to, right? I'm just getting like the full body ick thinking about scholarship forms I have filled out 20 plus years ago, right? And we have within the business a very rigorous continuous evaluation process to make sure that our values align with our pricing, which sometimes makes the price go up and sometimes makes the price go down, right? But based on what it takes for us to stay in alignment, in nervous system regulation, and to really show up honoring ourselves and the client.
I think just to part of what you're both speaking about, when I think about ethical pricing, to me, one of the words that comes up is that it's not extractive. And what I mean by that is it's on both sides of the equation. I don't think it's ethical when we start to get into this mindset of how can I like get as much as I can out of someone, right? That feels really icky and gross. And if that's what's going on, then we know that there's something there that needs to be worked on. But I think the other side is also true, which is how much can I give? I got to give till it hurts. I got to give until I bleed, right? Like extracting from ourselves without the compensation that makes us feel okay about it. Because I've been there and that builds up resentment. And you don't want to feel resentment towards your clients, towards your work, because that's a recipe, as you were talking about, Bea, for it not being sustainable. And so I think thinking of ethical, when you start to put it through this like lens of extraction, which is something that we're all, capitalism is designed on, when we can sort of step outside of that and say, what does this look like if I'm not trying to just extract from others or from myself, but instead trying to give in a way that honors my needs, my capacity, and that honors my client as well? Like, what does that look like? And it's not like there's never a simple answer for these things. Pricing is such a tricky thing. I think it's a little easier with products, still difficult, but a little easier because there becomes a little more of a formula around it. But when you're pricing services, it can be so challenging. It's just so challenging, especially when I'm not a fan of using hourly formulas. I think they're punitive for people who have more experience. And I see you all agreeing with that. But when you're not doing something as simple as, here's my hourly rate, this will take me 3 hours, it becomes more complicated because it's sort of like, how do you find that spot of it honoring me, the value that I'm bringing, not my worth, but the worth of what I'm bringing to this project or what this project does for my client, but also is realistic and competitive and all of those things. So this is always, I think, with people that I talk to, pricing is always just so complicated because it is really more art than science.
I'm curious, in the course of however long you've been running your businesses, have you changed your pricing? And if so, how did you make that decision in whatever direction it went? What did that process look like?
Yeah, I'm celebrating my 5-year anniversary this year, and we have changed prices. I was actually thrilled because we updated them last year, and we actually were able to lower several of them because we were able to kind of talk with our team internally and be like, hey, this task feeds into this task. So if we can kind of find a way to not cut corners, but find good strategic ways to go about this, we can actually make this more efficient. So now my pricing is actually a little bit lower for some services. Some stayed the same. But overall, we were just really, really pleased that we were able to do that for people. And I lost my train of thoughts there.
I've been coaching. I mean, I've been in business for myself for 20 years, but the first 10 of that was what I used to do, which is writing, content marketing. But as a coach, it's been 10 years. And my coaching work has generally just sort of incrementally gone up. And I really credit that to experience. The more experience I get, the better I think I am at what I do and the results I deliver with my clients. And so I think that merits better compensation, right? You're paying for that experience. That said, again, that's just my one-on-one work. Outside of that, things that have shifted for me are the other types of offerings that I do. And that is where I have gotten a lot more creative. And like I said, moving towards more equitable pricing models that allow these multiple price points. And that wasn't something I was doing 10 years ago, but because of my own learning and unlearning white supremacist culture and things like that, I've been able to see that model, I think, makes the umbrella bigger, the group of people who can come into this bigger, and it doesn't necessarily affect me directly in any painful way, because it's always like within group programs and stuff. So those things, when you give people, it's interesting. I used to be like, there's that fear around that. If I tell people that they could pay $50, they could pay $500, they're all going to pick 50, right? But when you give them these clear illustrations or understanding of what each of these price points is really about, people are incredibly good at self-selecting into the space that really honors where they are in their life. People recognize, especially I think now more than ever, people recognize where they have privilege or where they don't. And they are really good at self-selecting into those price points based on that. And so actually it ends up being sort of usually averaging out really well into sort of the middle zone. So that's usually where I start that sort of equitable pricing, is I start in the middle. What do I think it ought to be? And then I kind of offer on either end, because I know that ultimately it will probably end up being averaging out kind of in that middle place. So that's something that's new for me than 10 years ago.
Well, and I had a thought too while you were talking, Becky. I was remembering my train of thought from before of, yeah, so we've been able to lower our pricing. We've been able to be more competitive with that. We were able to find ways to be more efficient. But another reason that we wanted to evaluate pricing most recently is to be more protective of my time and be more specific of like, hey, this is what because kind of going back to what we were saying to you before. Okay, so maybe I've made a hard line of no, this is the price and you're with me. But then I bet you also have those clients that try to push you right? And they're like, okay, well, how many more meetings can I get out of you? How much more free? So that's another reason why I approached pricing again recently in my business, isn't just to lower it, but also to make sure that I'm protecting my time and my team's time and just holding that value. I don't know. Have you ladies gone through something similar?
I have both raised and lowered my prices over the course. So I'm like roughly 6 years in business, and yeah, and it's hard. I mean, my offer has also changed. My experience has also changed in that time. So I think that I had a coach pretty early on in my business, like about a year and a half in, who encouraged me to raise my prices. Now, a price increase was necessary at that point for what when you first start a business, you kind of just make it up. Like, I don't know, I'm just gonna like pick a price. And I guess it's like roughly based on how much time do I think this is gonna cost or take, and like how much time could I potentially work? How many clients could I potentially take on? And like what could that look like? Maybe you look at competitors, but at the time, like I started my business in 2019. I do podcast production and strategic consulting. And like I still had to explain to people what a podcast was before I could sell the service then. So it's not like now where you could easily pool a bunch of podcast editing, managing, production things and kind of compare like how do my services and prices compare to other people. Now I have that a lot more, but that market really didn't exist when I started my business. So anyway, all of that to say, I just kind of made up a price. So after I had gotten really good results for people and I had more experience and I realized how underpriced I was, my coach was not wrong about raising my price. But where she wanted to put my price priced me out of working with some people I really wanted to work with. And so then I did end up stepping my prices back down because there was a realization that in order to work with my favorite clients at the time, who I identified as my ideal client at the time, like, oh, I didn't really want to work with like the Fortune 500 company in that moment. I wanted to work with independent people who were trying to like do good in their industry and make their work matter, right? And not all of those people had the budget for the price point that my former coach had put me at. And so I ended up lowering. I have then since realized that there's room for both. And so I think this really gets into what a lot of you have said, which is making sure that my offers align with varying price points, varying priorities, and that there are options for people to self-identify and opt into. And I think it's not just self-identifying. We do like a totally free consulting session where anybody who wants to launch a podcast, we sit down and talk through like, this is what it could look like. Let's brainstorm together. But it's also, what is your capacity to make it look like that? And what is your capacity to pay for outsourcing help to make it look like that? And that is going to look different for every single opportunity. So we offer this free consultation to help you navigate making that decision and then go from there. I've gone from that to building from zero, where it's like a menu of services and you kind of build what that menu looks like, to actually feeling like, well, then everybody picks as close to zero as possible. So actually, let's take that consultation and we'll build a proposal for them from this menu, and we'll suggest, based on what we discussed, this is what we're recommending. But yes, you still come up against some negotiation that way. So now we've actually moved toward, this is the all-inclusive pricing. We've built a product, or we've built a service that is exactly what we think you need to build a really meaningful podcast. Now, we also understand one size does not fit all. So there is room for payment plans, custom packages, et cetera, to adjust this if that doesn't meet your priorities, right? But unless they've given us a reason up to that point to think that all-inclusive service does not match what they're looking for, in which case we would just give them a custom proposal. So I've gone both directions, like raise price, lower price, raise price, like build your own price. I don't know. It just looks different. It just evolves with time and who I'm working with and what my team capacity is and what season of the world we're in, because the chaos of things also matters. And yeah, it's all of the above for me.
It just tells you how not scientific it all is, right? And I think there's also that reminder that you go into business for yourself for the reason of you want to have more of that control over all of what you're doing. And part of that is getting to reevaluate as frequently as you need what your pricing structure looks like. And you have full permission to change that whenever you need to. And to be honest, there are times I will make concessions and adjustments for particular individuals. And I know I have that freedom to do that. It's not like that part for me also feels really ethical and good. If there's somebody I really want to work with, just because I think it would be great to do that and they can't afford my price, I'm not against making a change. Maybe I change how much I'm giving, or sometimes I still just give it to them for less because it feels good, but it's because I want to, right? And I think that freedom is something that we need to have, and that gives us more of that ability to feel ethical in what we're doing. Because I one thing I really hate is turning people away only because of money. Now, I don't mind turning someone away because I think we're not a good fit. This isn't the right match. I can't help what you need, all of those things. But when the only barrier is money, that is where it rubs against sort of my anti-capitalist feelings, where I'm like, okay, so then what are the rules here? Why can't I make some adjustments? And I love that about being self-employed.
And I've found over the years that the people I let into my programs at a particularly like, there's something about like the steeper the discount, the more they show up, has been my experience. And it's been so slamming and so awesome. Like that moment of saying, well, here's my philosophy. I won't turn, as a white Latina, I have immense privilege on this planet. I will not turn a woman of color away. She's like, I got $4. I'm like, okay, cool. Right. And I have found that 10 out of 10 show up and enrich the space and bring all that energy of like, I really want this, that this like charge your worth, like what you can pay is your worth BS just hasn't panned out, right? That someone paying 10 times as much puts in 10 times as much effort. Not at all.
I'm so glad that you brought up that exact phrase, charge your worth, because that's one thing I love to tell people. It's impossible to do. You couldn't. You are worth so much more than you could charge. And please know that. And to you listening, please know that it is not possible for you to charge what you are worth. You are worth so much more.
Unless you charge in unicorns. That's the only, just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I was like, I'm fucking priceless. Like
1 million unicorns, but 1 million unicorns, Becky Mollenkamp. 1 million unicorns, 1 bajillion unicorns.
That sounds like a lot of care work that I love that you're.
No, they come with a team.
If they come with a team,
it's a whole stable. Okay.
But then am I eating the unicorns? Because I would feel really bad about that. Well, I still have to eat. I gotta eat.
Okay, right? We're going to work on this unicorn-based pricing model, but it is your worth, and that's a
if the unicorns poop ice cream that I can eat, maybe.
Ooh, I'm gonna get with my team, and I'm gonna get back to you.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
No, I loved everything that you said, Bea. And someone said it earlier too, maybe it was Becky, but you also talked about like a sliding scale as well. So that way you can make sure it's like, hey, if this is all you can afford, you can do this. So that's actually one of my services. That's the top selling service, surprise, surprise, is my digital ad management, because that's what I do. I'm like, there's no setup fee, there's no onboarding fee, which is the exact opposite of what every agency says. They're always like, if you want us to run ads, you have to pay us this right off the bat, and you have to pay the ad platform. Whereas for me, I'm like, nope, the management fee comes afterwards, and it's purely based off your spend. So if you can only spend $500 on ads, then guess what? My fee is going to be $100. Sure. After we've shown that the ads are live and that everything's going, like a month after. And you said something too, Bea, about how like you want to, how someone came to you and she's like, oh, I can only offer $4. And you're like, but it's okay. It's a part of my heart. I want to help her. I bet you, because you were yourself and you did that and you gave back to her, she's probably one of your biggest advocates now, right? Like you said, she brought that energy. She's probably bringing other people, referring you. She's probably one of your biggest cheerleaders online because you met her where she was and you cared more about her than the money. And that's one of the freedoms we get, right?
And that's the worth part, right? So if we circle back and put the unicorns aside, but energetically, right? If we, right, that sort of vibe of taking care of one another, that is the greatest measure of my worth. And because my work is worth so much, that's why I want to give it away for free and at a scholarship rate. And that's why people who have the privilege to pay my market rate should be doing that. Balance, right?
Yeah. I think this is interesting too, because one of the things that's coming up for me and I don't know if this resonates with anybody that's in this direct conversation, but I know it resonates with people, somebody who's listening. One of my goals in growing my business is to build a business I can sell. And in order to make it a marketable business, I do need to grow it to a certain point where it's not just me making decisions. I love, and I put this in the chat, Becky, when you were sharing, like, I love having the freedom to be able to decide that this is a person I want to work with. And if the only reason I would not work with this person is price, then I get to make that decision of what I can do to bring that price down. And I love that. And I also acknowledge the fact that in order for this to be something that isn't just me, it has to grow beyond me. And then I lose some of that capacity. And that's one of the biggest difference between being a small business, and especially like if you're a sole proprietor, being just like a sole owned business, is that you kind of lose some of the ability to offer that creative control and that personal, meaningful connection with every single person you work with as you scale. And I don't want to say as you grow, because you can grow as an individual, right? But like as you scale beyond yourself, especially when we look at like positioning small businesses versus like large corporations. So I don't have the ability to have that same kind of personal connection. So when you're in the messy middle, which is huge, a messy middle between being a sole owned thing and a large corporation, like, but you want to scale enough to be able to sell your business, then how do you do that and maintain that level of care? Like, has that come up for any of you, or do you have any thoughts?
I have a thought. To answer your question, I don't have the answer. I imagine it depends. But you did make me think, because we keep coming you can tell everyone here has a big heart, that the reason we got into this is because we wanted to serve and give back, right? So I've heard us all echo, like, how can I give more? How can I lower my prices, but also protect myself? And that is all ethical. But the other side of the ethicality is, what if we do have a team? Like, let's say, Sarah, let's say you are scaling. We now also ethically have to protect our team. So anytime that we're not demanding our worth and our team's worth, or putting up proper boundaries with clients, we're now sacrificing our team's basically wellness and what they need. So we do, as business owners, have to look at it from both sides, especially when we want to scale, Sarah, of how can we make sure that we're constantly reaching the customers and clients that we want, while also caring for those who are helping us get there and grow.
I don't have this issue myself because I am the only person in my business, but all of my clients have teams, some of them very large teams, of combination usually of employees and consultants and subcontractors. And they're all people who care. I mean, they don't work with a feminist business coach unless they care a lot about doing business differently. And really what I think it boils down to often is it's just making a really what seems simple but is not so simple shift of, instead of putting profit above all else, it's putting people above all else, with profit second. That doesn't mean you don't make money. That doesn't mean we don't do the things we need to do to make sure we're making money. But it is making sure that at every step we're asking first, how are we caring for the people in this equation? Which means myself as the owner, my team, my clients, and the community that I'm a part of. How do I make sure that those things are cared for, that I'm doing this with their needs first? And then money comes second. We don't say, so I just give it all away for free, because we live in capitalism. As much as we may not love the system we're in, we live in a capitalist system. And so we have to operate in that way until we someday get to change that. But in the meantime, we have to function inside of that. So it's just making that shift of, instead, because inside of corporate America, the first question is always, how do we make more money? It is that we start with the money. And then what are the resources, people being resources, that we need in place to make that happen? There's no looking at, are our resources content, right? It is just about the money. It's that bottom line. So instead of just starting there, we start with, what do our people need in order to feel good about this situation? What does the client need? What does the employee need? All of it. And then what is the money that is needed to make that happen? And so that may mean higher prices. It may mean that you're alienating some people from buying from you, but you can do that in a way that feels ethical because you're prioritizing everyone's needs within the situation. And so I think that some businesses, yes, a lot of what we're talking about is for solopreneurs. If you want to sell your business, that's okay too. We live in this sort of system that we're in, and that's great. That will mean maybe making some of those compromises, right? You may not be able to have the flexibility that somebody else has, and that's okay, as long as you're still saying, you're leading every decision with, what does this mean for the people involved, right? And then the money. And I think, to me, that's really the shift that has to happen. And it sounds so simple, but truly it's not always so simple to do.
Yeah,
Because
I
it
love.
really involves like stepping out of that. And you were talking about this earlier, that like, I gotta get mine, like finance bro mentality that's like push for more, get more, do more, right? Which is at its core the most extractive. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the conversation about entrepreneurship is so centered on that, right? I know all sorts of coaching schools with like prizes for the 2 Comma Club and who broke 1 million this year. And that kind of frame, we're like, get it, like get your money. But like, what's the energy behind it, right? Is it to allow money as an energetic to move through you and to move out to the communities you care about? Is it to be of service? Or is it to pull a Bezos, right? And like destroy the planet a little bit more? What's the driver? And I think that's what, in this entrepreneurial world, in this day and age, we all just get to, all of those of us who are listening to this are the folks who care about this and who want to be in alignment with values, ethics, and leaving the world a more just place. So letting ourselves be guided by that feels imperative.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm curious. I guess this is mostly for Jaren, just based on like kind of what you all offer. But I am curious how that kind of shows up for you in being a person that's part of this group here that very much cares about like being good, doing good, caring about other people, wanting to like provide a service by definition. Like I want to serve other people. Has that come up for you at all in how you craft what your actual offer is, not just how to price it, but also like what does that offer even look like? Because for me, that was one of the things I kind of came up against when I first started my business is like I didn't set out to just focus on podcasting. I wanted to do kind of marketing and operations and help people with like their 1, 3, and 5 year goals, and almost more of not a coaching perspective, but a consulting perspective of like, let me help you craft a 1, 3, and 5 year plan to achieve the goals you already have outlined for yourself. And then I can either help you implement them or just create a system that your team can come in and do. But a podcast may or may not have been part of that. And very quickly, what I found is that what people wanted from me was podcasting. So that's how I wound up focusing on that. But I've kind of come up against sometimes this thing of like, how do we, and this is maybe a whole other podcast conversation, but like, how do we build as entrepreneurs, use entrepreneurship as a way, as a social justice tool, right? As a way to, and if the service that you provide isn't directly that, like I think Becky defining yourself as a feminist business coach and then Bea certainly doing healing work, like you are literally doing good. but yeah, I think like when you're just doing business support that is all businesses, how does that come up for you, Jaren? I'm curious.
Yeah, honestly, you said a lot there that I was just totally in agreement with. It's a question that I ask myself often as I've realized that I am fortunate enough to be a business owner. I'm fortunate enough to be a woman in this position. And Sarah is on the board with NAWBO with me, so we're around a lot of inspirational women often. And so a concept they've been talking about is, what do you want to do with your power? Like you've done it, you're accumulating power. How do you want to give back? And that is a question I've been asking myself a lot. I think the answer changes, right? As we, as people and business owner changes. But as for how I deal with it, obviously we've talked about competitive pricing, trying to lower that when I can, free offerings. So that's another reason why I'm trying to build out more free offerings so I can give work. But then you also said something earlier, Sarah, which I do. So I think we're in line here. I offer complimentary consultations and all of my services are a la carte. And one of my big things out the gate is like, let's just audit. Like I'll have people come and they're like, I need to hire you. And I'm like, okay, let's take a couple steps back and let's just see, do you need to hire me? Where are you succeeding? Where are your areas of opportunity? Let's build, what can you do yourself if budget is part of it? What can they teach you to do yourself? What can you actually pay for to outsource? So I'm actually building these strategies with them. And then one of my big things that I say in the consultation is like, cool, here it all is. Here's your audit. Here's the strategy. Here's everything that we talked about. Now I want you to go and discuss this internally and decide, do you want to work with me? Or do you want to go do this yourself? Or do you want to go work with someone else? Because you need to make sure you're aligned with the person that you're going to partner with too. And so, yeah, it's just, I'm tackling it every day. I don't think it's a one answer, but you just try to meet people where they are and just try to give them a package that works best for them. So yeah, technically all of my services are a la carte and built custom for what they need. And that's just a way that I'm trying to not force people into certain services like a lot of people in my industry do. I hope that answered your question, Sarah.
Yeah, it did. I think it's been interesting for me, and I feel like, Becky, that's probably actually literally what you help people do. But I feel like what we have been talking about on here is how I try to consider the fact that choosing entrepreneurship for me is a way to get to work outside of some of the boxes that having a 9 to 5 would put me in. So there have been ethical situations in my 9 to 5 life in the past before I started my business that I didn't like being in the situation that I was in and having a lack of autonomy over how to handle different scenarios. And as an entrepreneur, first of all, those situations have actually, where it's like a dilemma, have actually come up less often because I'm not putting myself in the situation to begin with. But secondly, if there is an ethical question, I get to be the one who answers it. So, like, it gets to be my ethics. And I think this is an interesting thing when it comes to kind of core values. So, I'm curious for all of you, like, kind of coming back to the pricing directly conversation, do you have core values outlined for your brand or your business? And if so, how does your pricing engage with those values? Like, did you use those values to create your pricing? Does your pricing align with those values? Have you thought about it in that context before? Like, what does that look like for each of you?
Two of my core values are creativity and liberation. There's others, but those are two of the core values that I think relate directly to this because obviously I'm really focused on liberatory pricing, which, means how, and I don't mean that in a way that it's like giving things away for free or any of that. It's about understanding the intersections of all of our varying identities, understanding privilege and oppression, and thinking about what role pricing and what role money plays inside of all of that and what I can do with my pricing to sort of meet that head on. And then I think that also then brings in creativity because often that looks like, how do I get creative here? How do I think differently about pricing? How do I challenge what we've always been told, whether it's challenging a formula or that I have to have one price or that everyone has to pay the same price or whatever the thing is, how do I challenge those things and get creative and think of new ways to approach this? So those two for me definitely play into it.
I didn't want to cut you off, Bea. Sorry. So we have done the core values exercise internally here, and I've done it for myself personally. It's not on our website. I have to update the website. But yeah, I know that for one, kindness is a big one, just to be able to be kind. And so that's just something obviously we try to respect internally, but then also externally, if there's a client that comes that's not a good fit, just like at least part ways and good kindness, right? And then honestly, there's another one that I have in there too, where it's just it kind of falls in line with creativity. I'm going to say the word wrong, but I think it's called precipicus, or another way to look at that is perceptive. So by that, what I mean is we're actually looking ahead. So we're going to look at the big picture. We're going to take a couple steps back to make sure that we're not, again, pigeonholing you or forcing you into something that you don't like. Or we're not going to tell you something that worked 10 years ago, but everything's changing. So one, we want to approach it with kindness, obviously trustworthiness, but then we also want to make sure that we're looking ahead and looking at the big picture and not just pigeonholing you or being orders takers.
I've shared about having a feminist framework for which continues to mean not being extractive, which I think covers so many bases, right? Respecting the client, respecting where they're at. So early on in my training, I came across a lot of business coaches who said things like, just tell them to rate their 401k, or coaching is worth any investment because it'll change your life. And there's a part of me that's like, sure. I mean, coaching can profoundly change your life. So you can make more money. You can bop, 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 bop. But telling someone who's living paycheck to paycheck to like go get a loan, a bank loan, right? Like there's that kind of banana stuff happening in the coaching world that just makes me super cringy. And so I will say that a lot of my original work around ethical pricing, yeah, I mean, I went to Oberlin in the 90s, right? Came from like an ethic of being a good feminist with a Marxist framework. And then layering a sort of, I don't want to say a pushing away, but yeah, really being repulsed by those kinds of tactics and wanting to bring in an ethic that is aligned with my value of kindness first, right? Which again covers so many bases of just be a loving, compassionate, good human in the world. I mean, I don't mean to be so like, I don't know, kindergarten room poster about it, but I also do. You know what I mean? If that's landing, like,
Yeah.
don't say ridiculous
Totally.
things.
And fun fact too, I was just gonna put in the chat because I didn't want to interrupt you. Google's mantra used to be just don't be evil. I think we all know where that landed. But still, like, yes, just bring those values, right? Just be kind, be a human.
Tells you how much capitalism can corrupt those values. Can I just
Right?
really, yeah, can I just say one thing too, though, because we're talking, I love kindness as a value. And I think a lot of this conversation, I mentioned it earlier, and I think it's come up a little bit. I just want to like, because I can in my head hear some listeners saying, they're talking all this about like how do I almost like prioritizing the client above everything, and it's not what we're doing, but we're talking a lot about that end of the equation with pricing of like how do we make sure it's ethical for our customers and all of that, and that's super important. But I think it's also really important for so many listeners because I know those folks, especially people who are newer in business, but honestly, for most women, folks with marginalized identities, this goes through our entire careers where again and again we under not because we could just extract more, but to the point where it's costing us, right? Where we are again growing resentful of our business, of our clients, where we are exhausted and tired, where we are giving too much and we're not getting enough back to actually live a full and rich life. And so I think kindness and all of these values, we also need to turn them back on ourselves and say ethical pricing doesn't just mean ethical for the client, right? It's not ethical if it's not ethical for both of us. And so I always go back to my favorite mantra, which is carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. Mediocre white men have no problem charging exorbitant rates. I don't think we should be exorbitant. I don't think we should be extractive. However, I think most of us who are asking these questions are probably not having the problem of charging too much. For a lot of the people who actually give a shit, and that's why they're asking these questions, they're probably charging too little. And again, I don't mean too little as in, hey, there's more there you could get. You could get every penny out of them. You could be a billionaire because we all should be. No. But you're probably charging too little for the value you bring to the table, for the energy you expend, for the capacity that you're burning, helping people. And so just that reminder that being ethical doesn't mean how do I price this in the least possible way so that I can eke by a life, right? I think it's also incredibly ethical for you to live a very rich and full life. And money is a way that is a resource that we have available to us to help us do that. And so just to make sure that when we have these questions that we're also evaluating, is my pricing ethical for me? Because I just think that can get a little lost in this for especially people who are all these bleeding hearts who care about everyone, which we should, but we have to care about ourselves too.
I love that you said that, Becky, because I was reflecting on how do my core values show up in my pricing. And yes, of course, like inclusivity is one of our things, and that does matter and that does affect my pricing. But it's more similar to what you all were saying. What's different is that one of our core values is also we get big results and also we have big fun. And those two things are both listed out. And in order for those things to be possible, there also has to be a certain amount of money. So in order for me to get you those results, we have to have the resources in order to make that happen and the capacity to make that happen. So I do think that also affects my pricing. This is not just a service to like show you how to do this for free. If I did that, your podcast would not get results because anybody can start a podcast and put it on the internet. And I can certainly tell you how to do that. It's not rocket science, and anybody can. And there are free hosting platforms out there. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg. However, it's a ton of work. If you're going to DIY it, you're going to do a ton of work and you're not going to get results from that podcast. That's what my company does. That's not what we stand for. And that's not what we offer. And when we've had offers in the past that have a really low price point, we have actually ended up like discontinuing those offers because what we find is that the people who are participating aren't necessarily getting results. And that is one of our core values. So I'm not even going to offer that of just, here's just how you DIY it for free. I'm not even offering that because yes, I could teach you how to do it, but also if you're not going to get results from it, that doesn't align with the point of what I do. What I do is help amplify underrepresented voices so that you can make the world a better place with using your voice, because I truly believe your voice matters. What's the point in telling you how to just churn out more content? I don't see a point in that, right? And there are other resources available for you if that's what you want to do. That's not what we do. So, and it's not a matter of like, what more can I get from you? And it's not a matter of like, I don't want to work with you unless you're a certain person. But if you aren't looking to make an impact with your voice, then yeah, you can just go turn out content. Anybody can. I have a little thing behind me. If you're listening, you can't see the video, but I have my Zoom background has a thing that says podcasting is for everyone. I do believe anybody can go start a podcast. And that's not the same as like podcasting with intention to get results. It's kind of like you can just go fuck around, or you can like date with intention, right? And either one is correct. Like it's whatever's right for you, but they're different. Right? We're doing different activities here. That's not the same thing. So anyways, I think that is an important call out to say like ethics work both ways. And I wanted to also just one other thing that came up for me while you were saying that, Becky, is like, there's no such thing as ethical consumption in capitalism, right? So then making ethical decisions, running a business in a capitalist society is hard, because truly like what aligns best with our individual ethics is like not capitalism. So then we have to also work within the system we're in, and that influences it as well. Anyways, Bea, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I think that's really important. I was going to bring in codependency, because I think it's really, really vital. So I work with human socialized women to overcome codependent, perfectionist, and people-pleasing thinking. That's my tagline. And I think we can get really codependent with our businesses, right? Where our pricing structure subconsciously creates a sense of worth, value, and safety for us, right? The 3 core essential human needs. And then I also, in that I'm putting out courses and programs and coaching for that community, I run up real hard against the I'm not worth it, right? Which is a whole other part of working with price and energetic exchange, of really supporting the people you're working with, not to be able to invest in themselves if they're able, without the story that they're not worth it, that anything other than their healing is worth a greater investment, right? And so that's the sort of tenuous line I'm on, with that value of not getting codependent with my clients, not deciding what they can afford or what they should pay, right? Allowing them fully to make their own decisions, right? So that comes into non-manipulative sales, right? Just clearly saying what you offer and letting people make their own best decision, knowing their own lives, while also helping people to see that in the framework where the money's actually there, right? You're worth spending money on. You're worth investing in and spending your time and money on. It's an interesting little line there.
Yeah. Anything coming up for any of the 3 of you that like, you can just ask us anything about our pricing, and I think we would just talk about it. Is anything coming up that you want to discuss or ask?
I just wanted to also, with what Beo talked about, and I think you've said a few times, and we probably all have at this point hinted at, like the idea of energetic exchange, because again, we're living inside of capitalism. It's not the greatest system, but also within that, we can start to challenge our own thinking and reframing what business, what commerce, what exchange means. Capitalism is a very specific sort of system that's about extraction. Just because we live inside of that doesn't mean our business models have to replicate those systems, right? We can think there is nothing wrong with commerce. Commerce just means an exchange, right? Bartering is a form of commerce. So commerce doesn't have to just be about how much money can I get for something. Commerce means, hey, this thing, you're doing that for me. And as an exchange, as reciprocity, I want to offer you this thing, whatever that looks like. And so we have that power within ourselves as business owners to think about what are the things that we need and want from folks. And again, this is obviously, I'm talking more so for folks who have more power and control over their own business, folks who probably are more solopreneur or smaller businesses, but you have the agency and the ability to challenge the norms and say, this could look different for me. It doesn't have to necessarily just be dollars and cents all the time, or it doesn't have to look like it's only this thing. It could be like, the energy that I get from that client is actually such a reward that I'm okay to charge less because of that. Or the true bartering, you do this for me, I'll do this for you. And also letting go of the idea that it has to all be equal and stuff, like, right? Like, let's just think about, like, I think the more that we can start to do some of that internal investigation of what do I believe business means? What do I believe commerce means? What do I think about when I think about money? Because so much of this pricing stuff is wrapped up in our own stories around money. So I just think the more that we can challenge ourselves about those issues and start to flip them on their head and challenge them and say, how do I look at this differently? I think it can really change our relationship with pricing and open all sorts of new doors that can be really great and rewarding.
It invites in a lot of curiosity, right? And a lot of creativity and a lot of co-creation with clients. So there's a painting behind me for folks just listening in that has a big anchor in it. And it says, be your own anchor. And the first time I offered my 6-month program, Anchored, an artist came up to me and said, artist, help. And I said, make me some art. And so she made art that I then shared with all the members of the group that year and have had this for almost a decade. I've had clients become project managers and help create things within my courses or help manage the online space for future classes. And really being open to that creates so much abundance for everyone instead of just shutting people out. Thanks for naming that, Becky.
No, I agree with everything that you guys are saying. And so again, Sarah and I are on NAWBO. And so we get to interact with a bunch of business owners all the time. And so it's very common to kind of do what you were saying, Becky, where it's like, hey, I'll offer you a free coaching session if you'll just like evaluate my website and help me like update things. Or like, hey, can you set up ads for me and I'll help get a podcast set up. And it's just become very much a lifting each other's up, lifting each other's business up, making sure you're writing reviews for each other. And it's become a community to be able to do that trade instead of just charging one another, right? But I will also say this, that I have been burned by that at the same time. So kind of echoing what you ladies were saying about, hey, ethics also includes protecting yourself. Well, I'm notorious. I know I told you, okay, I have to think about ethics from a client standpoint, but also from my team standpoint. Well, the person that I always sacrifice in that is me, right? So let's say I'm getting into a partnership with someone and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's work out a trade and I won't charge you for it. And I'll just put that all on me. That way I'm not I'm on my team. Right. And it's like, no, like that's not the answer. Like I need to make sure that if I am going to trade with someone or lift someone up, they're not going to disrespect my boundaries, that they're not going to step all over me. And then I'm not now sacrificing my personal ethics. And let's just call it what it is, like self-care, because I'm trying to care for everyone else, right? So it is a balancing act at the same time. You want to find those people that you lift up, but then you also need to know when to like put up the barriers.
I love this. This has been so good. And I think I just want to take a second to just thank each of you for your contributions to this conversation. I think the ethics of this conversation have just been really inspiring, and each of you really inspires me individually, and I am sure the person listening is feeling the same way. So to you listening, if you want to connect with any of these 3 people, which of course, or me, please also me, any of the 4 of us, of course you do, our information and our links are all in the description of the episode, so you can scope us out, connect with us, and learn more about us. So please do that. But thank you from the bottom of my heart to each of you for joining. I hope you will all be back and have additional conversations on Big Brave Business again. If you're not already signed up for more topics, I will certainly be sure to share upcoming ones later in the year as they're available, because I would love to have you back. Thank you so much for being here, both to those of you on the call as well as to you listening. Really appreciate you. And we'll see you next week.